Usually when we talk about business strategy, there's this expectation of clean lines.
Right, like it's a perfect science or something.
Yeah, like it's architecture. You drop a brilliant marketing campaign, and the sales projections just, go up and to the right on some beautiful PowerPoint slide.
Oh, absolutely. And the executive team just points to it and says, well, there it is. That's our future.
Exactly. But, it's entirely theoretical,
Right,
right?
totally theoretical. We love to imagine that deciding to sell 1 million units is like the hardest part of the battle.
Right.
Because the conceptual phase is comforting, paper doesn't push back.
But then you step into the world of actual manufacturing, right?
Yeah.
And supply chain management. And suddenly that beautiful PowerPoint presentation is, it's practically useless.
It really is. You're looking at a physical landscape that is just relentlessly unforgiving.
Unforgiving is the word.
Yeah.
So today, for you listening, we're looking at the literal bridge between a brilliant market strategy and the physical reality of making it happen.
Which is where things get messy.
Very messy. Because you can have the best ad campaign in the world, but if you haven't calculated your production strategies, your capacity limits, or your physical resources, you're going to fail.
Without a doubt.
So we are diving into the hidden engine that dictates how businesses actually survive and scale. We're getting into the aggregate demand and supply plans.
It's a phenomenal space to analyze, honestly, because it represents the absolute definition of where the unstoppable force of marketing meets the immovable object of factory capacity.
I love that framing.
Right. Because everyone loves talking about brand positioning or, market disruption.
Yeah, the sexy stuff.
Exactly. But very few people want to talk about how a company avoids going bankrupt because they're hoarding too much inventory in a humid warehouse.
Oh, man.
Or, conversely, how they avoid missing out on millions of dollars because a viral marketing campaign caused a massive backorder, and they simply lack the machines to fulfill it.
So let's start mapping out this territory for you, the listener. We need to track a product from its absolute broadest market strategy down to the factory floor.
And the source material outlines a really rigorous flow for this.
It does. You start with the product portfolio. Planners have to look at the entire landscape of what the company offers, categorize those products, evaluate their life cycle.
Service and brand strategy, too.
Right. And only then do they arrive at a marketing strategy.
Yeah.
So it requires understanding the fundamental nature of the thing you're selling before you ever turn on a machine.
And the critical anchor for all of this, the thing it all revolves around, is the product life cycle.
Okay, so break that down for us, because the life cycle dictates everything, right?
It dictates everything. So the sources highlight the classic market growth share matrix. It breaks down the life of any product into 4 distinct stages.
4 stages, got it.
And each stage demands a completely different financial and operational approach from the supply chain. You simply cannot treat a new product the same way you treat a legacy product.
Okay, so let's get into the operational realities of these 4 stages. What's stage 1?
Stage 1 is introduction. This is characterized by high market growth, but the company has a very low market share because, the product is brand new.
Makes sense.
So the strategic mandate here is simple, but incredibly expensive. Invest and grow.
I read this section and I immediately thought of raising a child.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. Like this introduction phase is the infant stage. You are pouring money, time, sleepless nights into this thing.
Oh, definitely.
It's chaotic. It's unpredictable, and it's entirely dependent on your investment just to survive. I mean, you aren't expecting a return on investment from a baby.
No, you're certainly not. And the operational equivalent of that is building custom tooling, paying premium rates for small batches of raw material.
Because you can't buy in bulk yet.
Exactly. And you're suffering through high defect rates as the factory learns how to actually assemble the product.
Yikes. Okay, but if you survive that infant stage?
You reach the second stage, which is growth. Here, you still have high market growth, but now you are actually capturing a high market share.
Okay, so the mandate shifts.
It does. It shifts to grow and profit.
The teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
They're hitting their growth spurt. The sheer scale of consumption is just chaotic. They're eating you out of house and home.
Right, but you can finally see the potential of the adult they're going to become.
Exactly.
Operationally, it's a rapid expansion phase. The factory is just trying to keep its head above water.
Which naturally settles into the third stage, right?
Yeah.
Mature.
Yes. Mature. At this point, the market growth has leveled off into low growth, but you maintain that high market share.
There's also the mandate there.
Profit and protect. The manufacturing process is fully dialed in, defect rates are negligible, Supplier contracts are optimized for those massive volume discounts.
So this is the stable adult. They have a job, they're paying their own bills, and honestly, this is the stage where you rely on them.
They're the foundation.
Right, this product is the cash cow. You aren't teaching them how to walk anymore. You're milking the stability they bring to the corporate dynamic to fund the infants and teenagers in the portfolio.
That's spot on. But eventually, every product reaches the final stage, which is decline.
The retirement years.
Basically, low market growth, low market share. The directive is reinvest and divest.
So you just cut them off.
Pretty much. You stop pouring resources in, you harvest whatever value is left, and you prepare to shut down the assembly line. You need to free up that physical space for the next introduction.
Okay, here is where the textbook logic hits a massive speed bump for me, though.
Oh, where's that?
Looking back at the introduction stage, the infant, the text specifically points out that estimating demand for new product introductions is, quote, problematic.
Oh, yeah.
That feels like a massive understatement.
It is the planner's ultimate nightmare. You're trying to forecast a future that has absolutely no historical precedent.
So you have this massive marketing investment, and it's entirely tied to expected demand. You're building factories, signing 5-year leases on warehouses, buying millions of dollars in raw materials.
All based on a guess.
Right. The customer demand is totally unproven. You are literally hallucinating a number. How on earth do companies plan a physical supply chain when the core data is just a guess?
Well, if a supply planner only looks at the marketing team's forecast of what the end consumer might buy, the product launch will crash and burn.
Guaranteed.
The sources provide a rigorous checklist of alternative demand sources that a planner must calculate to combat this uncertainty. You have to look at the structural costs of just existing in the physical world.
Okay, so beyond just a customer picking a box off a shelf, what else is draining inventory?
The list is actually extensive. Planners must account for interplant transfers.
Which is what?
Physically moving the product between your own facilities for final assembly or regional distribution. They also have to plan for spare parts.
Oh, of course.
If you're launching a complex new machine, you need a massive stockpile of replacement parts available on day one.
Because, if I buy a new model of a car on launch day and the alternator fails on the drive home.
They have to be able to fix it.
Right. No. The dealership can't tell me, sorry, we only manufactured whole cars, we don't have spare alternators yet. That would instantly destroy the brand's reputation.
Precisely. Then you have demand for exhibitions and pilot projects.
Like trade shows.
Yeah, you need fully functional units for international trade shows, for reviewers, beta testers, showroom floors.
Wow, that adds up.
And we haven't even talked about pipeline and safety stock buildups. You have to fill the distribution channels, the national warehouses, the regional hubs, the delivery trucks.
Back rooms of thousands of retail stores.
Exactly. Long before a single customer makes a purchase.
So you are manufacturing perhaps tens of thousands of units just to make sure the pipes of the supply chain are primed and pressurized.
Yes.
And none of those units are actually sold to a consumer yet, but they still require steel, plastic, and labor.
Furthermore, you have quality assurance needs. You will intentionally destroy a certain percentage of your early production run just testing it to failure in the lab.
Whoa, wow. I didn't even think about that.
And the text even lists charitable donations as a source of demand to review, whether that's for tax purposes, PR, or community goodwill. Every single one of these items requires physical raw materials, machine time, and human labor.
This completely shifts the perspective from forecasting to just hard arithmetic. We aren't just guessing what the customer wants. We are rigorously calculating the baseline physical requirements to even attempt the launch.
Exactly.
So if we know where a product lives in its life cycle, how does that reality warp the supply chain itself?
The supply perspective undergoes a radical transformation. In the early stages introduction and growth, the absolute primary focus is purely on increasing capacity.
Just build more.
Right. Efficiency is secondary. You just need to build more product to capture that fleeting market share before a competitor clones your idea.
Makes sense.
But as the product matures, the supply chain becomes infinitely more complex. You shift from a desperate sprint for capacity to a surgical focus on cost reductions, optimizing international distribution networks, leaning out your inventory.
And managing slight variations of the product.
Yes. But the trickiest part mentioned in the sources seems to be the NPI phase new product introduction.
Okay, what makes that so tricky?
You have this delicate, almost terrifying dance. of transitioning to new capacity for the new product while simultaneously trying to eliminate the old inventory of the dying product.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It is a high-wire act of phasing in and phasing out.
Exactly. If you cut off production of the old product too soon, you lose revenue and infuriate customers who still rely on it.
Like people who haven't adopted the new technology yet.
Right. But if you build up the new product too slowly, competitors steal your early adopters.
And if you miscalculate the phase-out entirely, you end up with millions of dollars of obsolete old product just sitting in a warehouse.
Which you eventually have to sell at a massive loss or pay a company to incinerate it.
Which brings up a crucial vulnerability in any business. What happens when management suddenly decides to change the strategy midstream?
That's where things break down.
Like what happens when the executive suite decides to accelerate the phase-out or push a massive surprise promotion to boost quarterly numbers? The phrase used in the source material is that these changes have a, quote, cascading effect on the tactical plans in other areas.
A cascading effect. Let's trace those dominoes, because executives love to talk about agile manufacturing and flexibility.
Oh, they love buzzwords.
But the reality I'm seeing in these texts is that flexibility in the physical world is never free. Flexibility carries a brutal premium.
Give me an example.
Okay, let's say marketing runs a surprise 30% off weekend promotion. The supply planner cannot magically conjure more product out of thin air. They have to interrogate the entire system.
Right, like do we even have the raw materials on hand?
Exactly. And if not, we have to pay exorbitant expedite fees to our suppliers to air freight materials instead of putting them on a cargo ship.
And once the materials arrive, do we have machine time? I mean, if the factory is already running at 90% utilization, you can't just squeeze more hours out of a machine.
So you have to pay your workers time and a half for weekend overtime, or you have to rapidly recruit and train a temporary third shift.
Which increases your overhead and usually spikes your defect rate, right? Because they're new.
Absolutely. Then you have to ask, do you have the warehouse space to hold the specialized promotional packaging? Do you have the outbound logistics capacity booked to ship the surge in orders?
Every single agile pivot from the strategy team carries a hidden compounding price tag in the supply chain.
Reconciling those price tags, forcing the demand plan to look the realistic capabilities of the supply plan in the mirror, is the entire purpose of sales and operations planning, or S&OP.
S&OP. So management suddenly demands flexibility, but the factory manager can't just snap their fingers to make the machines run twice as fast.
No, they can't.
They have to decide how to absorb that shock. Are they going to hoard inventory, or are they going to treat their workers like a dial they can turn up and down? That choice is the absolute core engine of the production plan.
To visualize this choice, the sources use a make-to-stock S&OP grid.
What does that look like?
It is essentially a matrix that tracks the sales plan, the production plan, and the inventory plan over a specific time horizon. It forces you to mathematically confront how you will meet demand.
Okay.
And management generally has to choose between a few primary production strategies. The most straightforward is strategy 1, level production.
Okay, I understand the theory of level production. You calculate your total expected demand for the year, and you produce at a perfectly average steady rate every single day, week, or month.
Right. You completely ignore the day-to-day fluctuations in customer orders.
So if the yearly forecast is 12,000 units, the factory makes exactly 1,000 units a month. Even in December, when retail sales tripled to 3,000 units, the factory stubbornly produces 1,000.
Exactly. The mechanism of level production relies entirely on inventory to absorb the shocks of the market.
How so?
During your slow summer months, you make 1,000, sell 200, and stack 800 in the warehouse. During the December rush, you make your steady 1,000, you sell 3,000, and you pull the remaining 2,000 out of that massive stockpile you built over the summer.
The appeal for the factory floor is obvious. It's incredibly peaceful. You have a completely stable workforce.
Very stable.
You never have to mandate surprise overtime. You never have to execute mass layoff. Your machine setups are predictable.
And your quality control improves because the process never changes speed. The workers develop deep muscle memory for the task.
The operational efficiency inside the four walls of the factory is maximized.
However, the financial burden outside those walls is severe.
Because of the inventory.
Yes. Storing all those unsold units during the slow months incurs massive inventory holding costs. You're paying for square footage in a warehouse, climate control, insurance security, and the capital tied up in unsold goods.
Plus the risk of obsolescence. I mean, if you spend 6 months building a mountain of inventory and suddenly a competitor releases a superior product.
Or a new government regulation makes your product illegal.
Right. You are holding a warehouse full of garbage.
This is why companies look at the opposite extreme. Strategy 2, which is chase production, often called demand matching.
Okay, chase production.
Under a chase strategy, your production output exactly matches your demand in any given period.
So if the market demands 100 units in January, the factory only makes 100.
Correct.
And if demand rockets to 5,000 units in February, the factory somehow churns out 5,000.
Exactly. Mechanically, your inventory costs drop to almost zero because you never hold excess stock.
But wait, how does a factory physically scale its output by 50 times in 30 days?
By bearing what the industry calls high smoothing costs, you are constantly manipulating your capacity, which primarily means treating your human workforce as a perfectly elastic variable.
Ouch.
You execute desperate hiring sprees when demand goes up and brutal layoffs the moment demand drops.
I want to linger on this because the math is clean, but the reality is incredibly dark. We are talking about hiring 100 people off the street, demanding they work exhausting shifts to hit a production spike, and then handing them pink slips 3 weeks later.
The source material explicitly acknowledges this human toll. It notes that chase strategies lead to insecure, unhappy, and overworked employees.
I can't imagine anyone wanting to work there.
It destroys the community's trust in the company as a stable employer. Furthermore, your physical plant utilization becomes erratic. You have million-dollar machines sitting idle for months and then running past their maintenance intervals during the spikes.
So you save money on warehouse space, but you spend a fortune recruiting, onboarding, and training new people constantly while literally destroying your corporate culture.
Yes.
Let's look at the actual numbers to see how this plays out, because the source text provides a phenomenally detailed math example comparing level and chase, and we need to walk through the mechanics of it.
Let's do it.
The product in the example is Family A vandal-proof commercial doors, in stock, all glass.
It is a brilliant example because a commercial glass door is heavy, fragile, and takes up a massive amount of physical space. It is the absolute worst product to store in a warehouse.
Exactly the kind of product that tests a production strategy. Let's run the level production math first.
Okay.
The company does a forecast and determines they will sell a total of 3,720 doors over the 12-month year. They currently have an opening inventory of 520 doors sitting in the warehouse. And management decides they want a safety cushion of 400 doors in inventory at the end of the year.
So the formula for a planner here is rigid. Total production needed equals total forecast plus desired ending inventory minus opening inventory.
So we take the 3,720 forecasted sales, add the 400 desired end state, which gets us to 4,120.
Right?
We subtract the 500 and we already have on hand. That means the factory physically needs to produce exactly 3,600 doors this year.
And because this is a strict level strategy, we divide that annual requirement evenly across the 12 months.
Right. 3,600 divided by 12 is exactly 300 doors a month. Come hell or high water, the factory turns out 300 vandal-proof doors every single month.
The fascinating part of the text's data is watching what happens to the inventory quarter by quarter. The annual forecast of 3,720 units is not evenly distributed. Sales are heavily weighted toward the back half of the year.
Okay, so in quarter one, they only forecast 1,000 doors sold, but they are producing 1,100. So inventory starts creeping up.
Exactly.
Quarter two is a disaster for sales, only 600 forecasted. But the factory ignores the market and blindly pumps out another 1,100 doors.
By the end of quarter two, the warehouse is overflowing. They have 1,800 massive, heavy glass doors just sitting in storage.
But then quarter three hits and demand spikes to 2,000 doors.
Right?
The factory only makes 1,100, so they drain the warehouse down to fill the orders. The mathematical mechanism works perfectly.
But the financial penalty for that stability is severe. The text provides the quarterly inventory holding cost. $40 per unit per quarter.
$40 a unit.
Because they hoarded so many doors in quarters 1 and 2, the total inventory holding cost for the year balloons to $288,000.
Over $250,000 just to let glass doors sit in a room doing nothing.
Yes.
However, let's look at the human side. Under the level plan, the company calculates they need exactly 11 workers to produce those 300 doors a month. And those 11 workers stay employed the entire year.
Zero hiring costs, zero firing costs.
Exactly. So the total cost of the level plan wages plus that massive inventory penalty is $556,000.
Now let's contrast that exact same scenario using a chase strategy.
The chase math is a literal nightmare for middle management.
Oh, it's brutal.
They start the year with 10 workers. Remember, quarter one demand is low, and quarter two demand is abysmal. To match production exactly to demand and maintain only a tiny 50-day supply of inventory, the company has to purge its workforce immediately.
The whiplash is immediate. In quarter zero, just to align with the new Chase plan, they fire 8.1 workers.
8.1 workers. They drop down to a skeleton crew of less than 2 people to run a commercial door factory.
It's absurd.
Then quarter one hits, and they have to scramble to hire almost 5 people. Quarter two hits, they hire 10 more people. Quarter three demand spikes, they hire 17 people off the street.
And then quarter four demand drops, and they fire almost 10 people again.
The chaos on the factory floor would be unimaginable. You have a constant influx of untrained labor handling heavy glass and industrial machinery.
The defect rate would skyrocket, and the veteran workers would spend all their time training people who know they're going to be fired in 3 months anyway.
The financial cost of that whiplash is quantified in the text too. It assumes a cost of $4,000 every single time you hire or fire a worker, representing recruiting, onboarding, training, severance, lost productivity.
So under the Chase plan, those HR change costs total $132,000 for the year.
But their inventory holding costs plummet. Right. Because they never hold excess stock. The inventory holding cost is only $127,000.
Exactly. When you add it all up, the wages, the much lower inventory costs, and the massive HR churn costs, the Chase plan totals $459,000.
Okay, this is the ultimate S&OP executive decision right here. The level plan costs $556,000. The Chase plan costs $459,000. The Chase strategy mathematically saves the company nearly $100,000.
It does, on paper.
But I look at that $100,000 savings and I think it is an illusion. You are saving $100,000 on a spreadsheet by terrorizing your workforce, destroying morale, risking massive quality control failures with temporary labor, and treating your local community like a disposable resource.
That's the reality of it.
This is where supply chain management ceases to be a math problem and becomes a profound leadership challenge.
Which is exactly why planners rarely operate in those pure extremes. The text details strategy 3 and 4, hybrid and outsourcing.
It's hybrid.
A hybrid strategy is a customized mathematical model that attempts to blend the two. Perhaps you level your production to cover your core baseline demand, ensuring a stable nucleus of employees, but you shift to a chase strategy using temporary labor or overtime to handle the seasonal peaks.
That seems much more realistic. But what about outsourcing? If you don't want to hire and fire temporary labor, why not just pay someone else to make the extra doors?
That's a valid option. Outsourcing allows you to keep your internal factory running at a strict level production rate, protecting your core workforce and optimizing your internal machines. When demand spikes above that level, you subcontract the excess production to a third-party manufacturer.
But wait, if you outsource the peak demand, aren't you just handing your biggest profit functions over to a competitor?
You are. The subcontractor has to make a profit too, so your margin on those outsourced units drops significantly.
And what happens if they build the doors wrong? You lose direct control over quality, but your brand's name is still on the glass.
Those are the exact trade-offs a planner must weigh. But, all of these strategies, level, chase, hybrid, they assume that your physical factory actually has the capacity to execute them.
Right.
If you choose a chase strategy and demand spikes by 500%, you can hire 50 new workers. But if you only have 10 workbenches and 2 ovens, those workers have nothing to do.
Which brings us to the physical boundaries of the operation. We have to look at long-term capacity choices. You can manipulate inventory and labor on a monthly basis, but pouring a concrete foundation for a new factory wing takes years.
It does. The sources define capacity strategy as a fundamental choice made as part of the overall manufacturing strategy. To grasp how companies make this choice, we have to understand the mechanics of the U-shaped curve.
The U-shaped curve. Now, I always assumed the physics of manufacturing dictated that bigger was unconditionally better. Economies of scale, right?
Right, that's the common assumption.
If I make one commercial door in my garage, it costs a fortune in custom parts and my own labor. If I build a massive factory and make 1 million doors, the cost per door plummets.
You are describing the left side of the U-shaped curve economies of scale. As volume rises, unit costs drop dramatically. You spread your massive fixed costs, like the building lease and the management salaries, over a larger number of units.
And the workers get better at it.
Exactly. Your workers specialize and become highly efficient. You gain the leverage to demand bulk pricing discounts from your raw material suppliers.
But the curve is U-shaped, meaning the cost eventually stops dropping, hits a floor, and starts going back up. Why would the cost per unit increase just because a factory gets even bigger.
Because you enter the realm of diseconomies of scale. Size eventually creates insurmountable friction.
Friction like what?
When a factory scales beyond a certain point, human communication breaks down. Management becomes bloated and bureaucratic. You have to hire layers of middle managers just to coordinate the chaos, which adds overhead without adding any value.
Oh, and the logistics of moving that volume of raw materials into one single geographical location must become a nightmare.
It does. You start causing traffic jams at your own loading docks. Machines are pushed past their optimal duty cycles and break down more frequently, causing line stoppages.
So a strategic planner has to find the bottom of that U-curve, the absolute most efficient size for a facility, and try to maintain operations there.
Ideally, yes.
But as market demand grows, the company has to add more capacity. The text outlines 3 distinct strategies for the timing of that expansion: lead, lag, and tracking.
The timing is everything. Let's dissect the lead capacity strategy first. Mechanically, this is building the factory before the demand even exists.
Your capacity leads your demand.
Right. The advantages are aggressive and revenue-focused. You optimize your potential market capture. If demand suddenly explodes due to a viral trend, you are the only company in the market with the physical machines ready to supply it.
It maximizes customer satisfaction because you never experience stockouts.
Exactly. And it provides a massive output cushion to handle unexpected disruptions, like a machine breakdown or a supplier delay.
You know, I picture this as an indie band that has one minor hit on a local radio station, and they immediately go out and sign a non-refundable contract to rent a massive 50,000-seat stadium for their next concert. They are anticipating massive demand. If the fans actually show up, it's the most profitable night of their lives.
What the risk is catastrophic.
Exactly. If the fans do not show up, the band plays to an empty stadium and goes bankrupt paying the rental fee.
That is the fundamental disadvantage of a lead strategy. It requires massive early cash outflows and carries a terrifying risk of permanent overcapacity. You could build a $100 million factory for a market trend that vanishes overnight.
Which is why more conservative, financially driven companies choose the lag capacity strategy.
The lag strategy is the exact opposite. Your capacity deliberately lags behind your demand. You refuse to spend a single dime expanding your factory until the market demand is absolutely proven, undeniable, and sustained over a long period.
So the indie band stays in a tiny 50-person garage. They don't upgrade until there's a line of 500 angry people around the block trying to get in. Every single show is guaranteed to be sold out.
The financial benefits of that are immense. Your plant utilization is always pegged at 100%. Your unit costs are incredibly low because you are squeezing every ounce of value out of your existing assets.
You delay your massive capital spending as long as possible, keeping cash on the balance sheet, and there is almost zero risk of building overcapacity.
But the hidden cost is devastating. Those 500 people waiting in line outside the garage, they aren't going to wait forever.
No, they're getting frustrated, and eventually they are going to walk across the street to see a different band that actually has room for them.
Exactly. The lag strategy mathematically guarantees that you are losing revenue and handing your customers directly to your competitors because you refuse to supply them. You operate with absolutely no cushion. If a single guitar string breaks, the whole show stops.
This extreme dichotomy leaves planners with the third option: tracking capacity.
The moderate, agonizing middle ground.
Agonizing is right.
It is a step-by-step approach. You add small, incremental chunks of capacity that closely track the rising demand curve. You upgrade from the garage to a 200-seat club, then a 500-seat theater.
It requires relentless management attention, though, right?
Constant small-scale construction projects. But it attempts to balance the catastrophic financial risk of the lead strategy with the market share bleeding of the lag strategy.
I want you, the listener, to evaluate your own industry through this lens. Does your industry prioritize capturing every possible speculative sale, operating with a lead strategy?
Like major tech companies building massive billion-dollar server farms years before the AI software is even fully developed, they're terrified of not having the compute power when the market arrives.
Right. Or is your industry heavily focused on strictly controlling capital costs, operating with a lag strategy where you have to wait 9 months to get a custom piece of furniture because the manufacturer refuses to build a second assembly line? The capacity strategy fundamentally alters the DNA of how a business operates day to day.
And regardless of whether a company builds early or builds late, eventually, the physical reality of the factory floor has to answer to the financial reality of the balance sheet. Sizing the factory leads inevitably to the CFO's desk.
The financial reality check. We have planned the inventory, We have sized the physical footprint of the factory. We have mapped out the labor requirements. But before anyone is allowed to hit the giant green Jew button on the assembly line, the CFO is going to look at the massive pile of capital we are about to set on fire and ask one very simple, terrifying question.
At what exact moment do we actually start making money on this?
Yes. Answering that question requires cost volume profit analysis, or CVP.
It is the mathematical study of how a company's profits change in response to various levels of output and selling price.
Okay, walk me through the mechanics of CVP.
CVP analysis often starts with a harsh fundamental assumption. The market, not the company, dictates the selling price.
You can't just charge whatever you want.
Exactly. You face a fixed or falling market price for your product because of competition. Once you accept that reality, you have to work backward to determine what your required costs must be to achieve your available profit margin.
So CVP clarifies exactly how a 10% drop in sales volume or a 5% increase in raw material costs will multiply and impact your final bottom line.
Yes. And the most critical lever inside CVP, according to the text, is the contribution margin.
Contribution margin, what is
It's the absolute bedrock of profitability analysis. It is defined as the difference between your sales revenue and your variable costs. It represents the pool of money left over to cover your fixed costs.
Let's run a hypothetical simulation to make this tangible. I pulled the specific data structure from the text for this.
Yeah.
Let's say our total projected sales for the year are $5 million.
Okay, $5 million.
Our variable costs, the expenses that go up every time we make a single unit, like the raw polycarbonate, the glass, and the hourly labor directly assembling the door, total $1.5 million.
Got it.
Our contribution margin is that $5 million in revenue minus the $1.5 million in variable costs.
Which leaves you with a total contribution margin of $3.5 million.
Right. And if we want to understand the efficiency of that, we calculate the contribution margin ratio. We divide that $3.5 million by the $5 million in total sales. That gives us a ratio of 0.7 or 70%.
That ratio tells the CFO that for every single dollar of sales revenue that comes through the door, 30 cents immediately goes to paying for the raw materials and direct labor, and 70 cents contributes to paying off the factory overhead and eventually generating profit.
Let's apply this to a single physical unit, one vandal-proof commercial glass door.
Okay.
If the market dictates we can only sell one door for $5,000, and we know the variable costs to physically build that one door are $1,500, the unit contribution margin is $3,500.
Right. Every time a door rolls off the line, it carries a $3,500 payload.
Now we introduce the final variable, fixed costs.
These are the massive looming expenses that do not change whether you make one door or 10,000 doors. The multi-year lease on the building, the property taxes, the salaries of the executive and management teams, the depreciation of the heavy machinery.
The text assumes our fixed costs are a staggering $2 million. So here is the ultimate question that S&OP tries to answer. How many doors do we have to physically build and sell just to break even, just to stop bleeding cash and hit zero?
The break-even point formula is elegant but ruthless. Total fixed costs divided by the unit contribution margin.
We take the $2 million in fixed costs and divide it by our $3,500 payload per door. The math works out to exactly 571 units.
571 doors.
This is the psychological pivot point for me. Until you sell unit number 571, the company is effectively operating at a loss.
Completely.
Every single dollar, that $3,500 contribution margin from doors 1 through 571, is instantly swallowed by the $2 million black hole of factory overhead. You are just desperately digging yourself out of a massive hole. The workers on the floor might feel like they're being highly productive, but financially, the company is drowning.
But the moment you assemble and ship Unit 572,
the physics of the business completely change. On door 572, the factory overhead is officially paid off. That $3,500 unit contribution margin drops straight to the bottom line as pure, unadulterated profit.
From Unit 572 onward, the company is a cash printing machine.
It completely changes how you view production. You aren't just making products, you are running a terrifying race to the break-even line before the fiscal year ends.
It connects the physical, gritty reality of the factory floor directly to the existential survival of the corporation. If your chase strategy caused a quality control issue that delayed production by a week, you might never reach Unit 572.
We're in the home stretch of this process now. The macro strategy is set. The production is scheduled between level and chase. The physical factory is sized perfectly to the U-curve, and the break-even math proves the whole endeavor is financially viable.
Right.
The final critical step is verifying that we actually possess the raw, physical ingredients, and the human talent to execute this massive plan.
This execution phase relies heavily on a bill of resources.
Now, we all know a bill of materials is just the recipe. It lists the two hinges, the pane of glass, the handle.
Yeah.
But this source text insists on a bill of resources. Mechanically, how is this factoring in macro-level constraints that a standard BOM completely misses?
Well, a bill of materials is microscopic. It tells you what parts are inside a single box. A bill of resources is macroscopic.
How so?
It connects those parts with the high-level capabilities, machine hours, and facility constraints required by entire product families. It is a strategic tool for high-level resource planning to ensure you don't overcommit your factory.
The source text gives a phenomenal, fascinating example, a bill of resources for these commercial doors. It lists the resources required per 1,000 units, and it tracks metrics that are wildly more diverse than just metal and glass.
What specific constraints does it highlight?
It tracks non-clean room labor in hours. It tracks oven curing space. And the unit of measure isn't time, it's cubic feet.
That's interesting.
It tracks polycarbonate recycled in massive tons. It tracks the availability of specific bottlenecks, like Worksider 23. And my absolute favorite, it tracks troy ounces of gold.
Gold in a commercial glass door.
Right. Maybe it's for high-end decorative architectural hardware, or perhaps it's a conductive element used in the advanced electronic locking mechanisms. But the point is, the supply planner has to simultaneously secure hundreds of tons of recycled plastic, calculate the exact cubic feet of hot air available in a curing oven, and procure actual troy ounces of precious metals traded on global commodities markets.
It's a massive juggling act.
If any single one of those vastly different resources is unavailable, the entire production plan violently halts. You can have all the polycarbonate in the world and 100 workers standing by, but if Worksider 23 is broken or the oven is full, you make 0 doors.
This is exactly why resource planning is effectively a massive reality check. It evaluates the theoretical feasibility of the S&OP plan against the brutal reality of resources with long lead times. You cannot procure a troy ounce of industrial gold or build a new curing oven overnight.
And it isn't just physical materials and oven space. The sources strongly emphasize the role of human resources in this planning stage.
Yes, HR is critical here.
HR is often viewed as purely administrative, handling payroll and benefits. But in this context, HR is deeply strategic.
In unique manufacturing environments, HR is responsible for job design, calculating precise staffing levels, managing cross-training initiatives, and fostering employee empowerment.
Let's tie that back to our chase strategy example. If the math dictates you're going to hire 17 people off the street in Q3 to handle a demand spike, HR has to design training programs that can get those people safely operating heavy machinery and handling fragile glass in a matter of days.
Exactly.
If the HR training pipeline is too slow, the production plan fails, and you miss the break-even point. HR is a bottleneck just like Worksider 23.
Absolutely. And the final piece of this execution puzzle introduces a modern, highly sophisticated approach to managing all this complexity and volatility, demand-driven MRP, or DDMRP.
We have spent this entire deep dive talking about forecasts. Forecasting market demand, forecasting sales, forecasting inventory needs. But the text repeatedly hints that relying solely on forecasts is incredibly dangerous.
Because forecasts are, by definition, almost always wrong.
They are.
They are educated guesses based on historical data that cannot predict the future. DDMRP attempts to mitigate that inherent flaw by shifting the focus away from pure forecasting and toward strategic buffering.
Strategic buffers, like massive shock absorbers built into the supply chain.
Precisely. Instead of blindly pushing materials through the system based on a guess of what might happen, DDMRP uses strategic buffers to isolate system nervousness and prevent the bullwhip effect.
Let's define those terms mechanically. What does a nervous system look like on a factory floor?
System nervousness occurs when a tiny change at the customer level cascades into chaos at the factory level. Imagine a single retail customer cancels an order for 10 doors.
Yeah.
In a highly reactive, unbuffered system, the planning software automatically tells the purchasing manager to instantly cancel the incoming glass shipment. That cancellation triggers a penalty fee from the glass supplier. Meanwhile, the factory manager sees the drop in demand and cancels the weekend overtime shift, angering the workers.
Right.
A day later, a different customer orders 12 doors and the whole system violently reverses itself. That is nervousness.
And the bullwhip effect is when that nervousness amplifies as it moves backward through the supply chain.
Exactly.
A retailer overorders a trendy item by 5%. The regional distributor panics and orders 10% more from the national warehouse to be safe. The national warehouse orders 20% more from the factory. The factory manager sees a 20% spike, assumes it's a massive permanent trend, and breaks ground on a new facility. By the time the factory is built, the trend is dead, and the supply chain is choked with inventory.
DDMRP stops that by inserting buffers. The text describes these buffers dynamically adjusting across 3 zones: red, yellow, and green.
Break down the mechanics of those zones.
The red zone is your danger zone, representing the absolute minimum safety stock embedded in the system. The green zone is your optimal operating range, dictating your order sizes. But the critical dynamic heart of the system is the yellow zone.
The text specifically states the yellow zone is mathematically set to 100% of your average daily usage over the lead time.
Let's run the math. If it takes exactly 10 days to get a shipment of specialized hinges from your supplier, and your factory consumes an average of 50 hinges a day, your yellow zone buffer is set at exactly 500 hinges.
It mathematically guarantees you have exactly enough raw material to survive the lead time while you wait for the next delivery truck to arrive. It absorbs the shock.
It does.
If a customer cancels an order or doubles an order, the factory doesn't panic and cancel shipments. The buffer just absorbs the variance, and the system remains calm.
But the truly strategic question for a planner is, where do you put these buffers? You cannot just buffer every single part in every single machine, or you revert right back to having massive, crippling inventory holding costs. How do you decide where in the physical supply chain to drop these expensive shock absorbers?
The sources outline very specific, highly strategic criteria for buffer placement. First, they look at customer lead time improvement.
Which is huge.
If placing a buffer of finished, ready-to-ship doors in a regional warehouse near a major city cuts your delivery time from a week to 2 days, and that 2-day speed wins you lucrative contracts over your competitors, you put a buffer there.
It creates what the text calls order winners. It uses inventory not as a liability, but as a weapon to capture market share.
Second, you look at demand and supply variability. If a specific raw material supplier of recycled polycarbonate is notoriously unreliable, their trucks are always late or breaking down, you put a massive buffer of their materials directly at your receiving dock to protect your factory from their incompetence.
Third, they mention evaluating the bill of material structure to find points of maximum flexibility.
Right, putting buffers in places that keep your options open. Instead of freely assembling and painting thousands of doors in different colors and hoping you guess the right trends, you keep a massive buffer of generic, unpainted, partially assembled doors.
When a firm order comes in, you only have to paint them and add the hardware. It compresses the lead time without committing the inventory to a final state.
And finally, the most critical placement: protecting bottlenecks. This relates directly to the theory of constraints. If Work Center 23 is the slowest, most complex machine in the entire factory, it dictates the maximum throughput of the entire company.
You place a massive buffer of materials directly in front of Work Center 23. You ensure that machine never, ever has to stop running because it is waiting for parts from an upstream process. If Work Center 23 stops, the company loses money.
It is a brilliantly complex, interconnected ecosystem. Every single decision reverberates through the entire structure.
It really is.
Which brings us to the end of our journey today. Let's recap the incredible cascading interconnectedness of what we've unpacked in this deep dive. We started at the absolute highest level of abstract theory.
We saw how a broad corporate marketing strategy dictates where a product lives in its life cycle.
That life cycle stage forces a fundamental, brutal choice on the factory floor between a steady, expensive level production strategy and a chaotic, culturally destructive chase production strategy.
That production choice dictates the physical footprint required, forcing management to choose whether to build a massive factory early, using a risky lead strategy, or, using a conservative lag strategy.
Which locks in your massive fixed costs and mathematically determines your break-even point in the CVP analysis, which ultimately dictates how many cubic feet of oven space, troy ounces of gold, and strategic DDMRP buffers you need to procure, track, and protect, just to hit your survival point of exactly 571 commercial glass doors. It is a masterpiece of logical cascading consequences. You pull one lever in the boardroom, and it changes how much recycled plastic a worker in a clean room is allowed to use 6 months later.
It is the stark reality of making physical things in the modern world.
But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over. Something that builds on these sources, but looks ahead to the realities we face today. We just learned that demand-driven MRP relies entirely on dynamic buffers, with that critical yellow zone strictly tied to 100% of your average daily usage over a historical lead time.
It relies entirely on the assumption that historical data is a reliable predictor of near-term future stability.
But we live in a world where global supply chains can fracture overnight. Major international ports close without warning, vital shipping canals get blocked by grounded cargo ships, global pandemics rewrite consumer behavior in a weekend, and geopolitical conflicts sever access to raw materials instantly.
All of which we've seen recently.
Suddenly, historical data becomes worse than useless. It becomes actively misleading. So here is the question you have to ask yourself. How does a company plan? How do they calculate a mathematical buffer when the very concept of an average ceases to exist?
It's a huge challenge.
If the math of supply chain planning inherently looks backward to calculate safety, how do you buffer against an entirely unpredictable, unprecedented future? Keep questioning the math, keep exploring the constraints, and above all, keep digging into your sources. We'll see you on the next deep dive.